Well, let's go ahead and move on to the balance section, James. I think one of my favorite parts of the patch. First thing up on our docket, I'll have numbers tunings today, but the first one will be hitting the sword.
Right, so we reduced the sword damage by 11%. There were just too many cases where you'd have like a lot of armor, right? Maybe not full, but you'd have a lot.
Yeah.
And it would just be able to get that kill on you one shot earlier. So we moved those breakpoints down. There are going to be more cases if you're at full resources.
Okay.
The sword's going to take a little longer to kill you. And hopefully that'll give you a chance to, respond to the person with the sword, use some abilities, stuff like that.
I gotta say, yeah, I've been playing a lot again recently, and I'm playing with my buddy Alternate. I think you know who that is. And nothing strikes fear in his heart than when he hears the sword swing. Like, he doesn't really get worried about a lot of situations, except for when there's a sword in his face. So I was like very respectful of swords, I think, in my comeback. So it's cool that that's getting a damage reduction. I don't have to be quite as worried anymore. Next thing on the docket is seeing a damage increase, however. Pistol's going up by 10%.
Right, so sort of the core combat at high level play is very peak based with those projectile weapons, right? And so that high burst damage, even if their long term like DPS or throughput is relatively low, they're really powerful. That's not going to change, but we do want to make sure that weapons like the pistol or some other ones that we're looking like the SMG can stand up a little bit better in those situations. So just a little bit more damage, and if they catch you on their terms where you're in the open, they should have a little bit of a better time killing you. That said, if you're playing really well with a projectile weapon or a class weapon and you're talented into it, it's still going to be more effective than something like the pistol.
Well, that's always the cost, right, of that projectile versus the hit scan. And it looks like hit scan is kind of the theme of some of these changes. Burst rifle, assault rifle, and the SMG all seeing that 10% damage increase as well, kind of for the same reasons.
Same exact sort of thing, right? Like they're gonna lose when you're peeking against them, right? Because they're consistent damage and a projectile is burst damage. But even if they're in the open, it was still a little too much in the favor of the person with the projectile.
Oh, this next one hits my heart. Not too bad of a nerf here, but the longbow damage is being reduced by 6%.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than you'd expect because the longbow hits pretty hard.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
It's I think it's around like 50 damage that we took off, but just longbows, especially if you got a headshot, it was just doing too much of your life.
I think the fully charged talent's like 30% on there, so there's a lot of ways to get a lot of extra damage.
Right, and that's the thing is that this will affect those more because we're taking the base down. Right, so if the base goes down by 50, well, you're running that 35% talent.
There's less to scale.
Exactly. Now you're going down by like 65.
Gotcha. So not the only class weapon being hit today. The throwing axe is also seeing a damage reduction by 7%.
Throwing axes hit really hard, and they're real big. They're real big. So if you're in a situation that's like mid to close quarters, the other person has a throwing axe in a corner, what do you do?
Tough.
Yeah. You got like maybe you have a concussion bomb to knock them into the open,
in that situation,
but like yeah, it's just kind of a bad place to be.
Right, and just some extent, right, if you're the guy with running around with the knife at the gunfight, you trap somebody in that corner, right? That payoff, I think, should be there.
Absolutely, but even if you weren't in that situation, if you got the hit, right? Like, the throwing axe is harder to use than a lot of other weapons at mid-range.
Right.
But when you lob it, it was a little too rewarding.
Gotcha.
So just toned it back a little bit, 7% off the throwing axe. Hopefully makes it just a little bit more in line.
Gotcha. So I hope these changes, or I think these changes kind of go together, these next two, LMG and the Gatekeeper, which is the big bad minigun. I like that name for that. And they're both seeing 15% damage increases.
Yeah, so the LMG was actually comparable to other weapons in terms of DPS. So we pulled it up a little bit for sort of the same reasons as the SMG and the burst rifle. It only exists at Legendary. And we do want to make it powerful when you do find this weapon. And it chunks pretty hard on a per shot basis. It's around 150 damage.
Sure.
So it's pretty chunky for a hit scan weapon.
Cool.
The Gatekeeper was already the highest DPS weapon in the game, but there are a lot of situations where you were playing properly, but the other team could still, they could still out DPS you, even though you were playing it right.
Meaning you have your range limitations, so
exactly.
You pay a movement speed cost as well while firing this weapon?
You do. So basically the design of the Gatekeeper is if both players are in the open and they're in the Gatekeeper's range and the Gatekeeper is already spun up, there should be no competition because
Gotcha.
of all of the
Conditional
Spin
situation.
up,
exactly
movement speed, range,
spin up, movement
yeah.
speed, range, yeah, stuff like that. When you're indoors and you're playing around corners and the gatekeeper has to move and spin up,
Yeah.
you're going to demolish him. I mean, just throw a firebomb at the guy's feet, right? And that alone is going to cause a big problem. So the gatekeeper will now do a lot of DPS. It's around 2,000.
Gotcha. Wow, that is a lot. And I think, you know, keep in mind, guys out there on the field, you got to be like, was I in his wheelhouse? Was I in the best situation for my weapons, or was I in a good situation for her? Like, don't get frustrated right off the bat. You got to think about what did he have to do that to me?
That's kind of what Realm is about, right? It's like, what's my loadout, and how do I set up situations where my loadout is better than their loadout?
Yeah. And that's kind of the fun, you know, being able to identify that stuff. Very, very good. That does it for the weapon changes, though. We're going to move on to abilities. Deploy turret. The damage of this ability is going down by 10%.
So turrets are really great for like controlling where chickens move, or controlling an area, or being a nuisance. But if you just sort of let a turret chunk at you, it was a little too effective.
Okay.
We still want them to be something that you're going to have to clear out. You know, when you notice a turret, you should shoot it and you should kill it because it's going to add up. But we toned it back a little bit just to make sure that if you weren't maybe perfect and you weren't getting it after 1 or 2 shots, it wasn't as incredibly costly.
Sure. So Soar will be the next ability, seeing a hit, and the fly speed will be reduced by 10%.
Right. Soar's advantage is its versatility in movement. Like, you can get anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? What our thinking is, you know, if you have that, maybe it shouldn't be quite as fast as something like Heroic Leap, right? So we toned back the speed a little bit. Should be a little easier to hit someone using Soar if they're out in the open. But, you know, you still have the value of like, okay, I can fly out of a first story window and back in through a second story window.
Yeah, that's
you still have that
very
amazing versatility.
Very
so we
true.
just want to make sure that there's, you know, there's some costs associated with that.
So much you can do with that ability for sure. However, dodge roll, not quite the same category, and it will be seeing a cooldown reduction by 4 seconds at all ranks.
Yeah, so dodge roll, we just wanted to get people using it a little bit more frequently when they had it.
Tough to compete with that withdrawal, baby.
It is. At the same time, though, right, if you can use dodge roll more often, then maybe it gives you more options.
Definitely.
And I mean,
think in the super early iteration of the game, like legendary dodge roll with the, you know, when you're running a hunter, it's like 2 or 3 second cooldown.
Yeah.
And so that's like, it became competitive. You're like, well, I can just cover so much ground. I can really move around a ton with this ability.
right, and now I think dodge roll, the hope is that it takes a spot where it's like a good response, right? Like, you know, somebody uses an ability to knock you out of cover, you can use dodge roll. Okay, now they use a movement ability to chase after you. Well, your dodge roll's back up. You can use it again. You're not using it constantly, but whenever something happens, you should be able to dodge roll soon after to respond.
I think with all, you know, all the versatility Soar has, dodge roll really doesn't. So having a low cooldown definitely makes it more usable. Ice block will be next up on the docket, and it will now heal the player for 150, 300, 450, and 600 over its duration.
Right. So the problem with ice block was you'd be like, I need to buy time, and you'd freeze.
Yeah.
And then the other person would just line up a headshot. Now there's some gameplay there, right, where you can use different timings of when you break your ice block. So maybe they don't know exactly when you're going to do it. But we also added some healing, just so there is a little bit of a chance to refresh a little bit and get a little bit stronger. We will be keeping a close eye on the ice block and ghost walk combination, because that has been insane in the past, and we want to make sure that you can't chain those.
Gotcha.
But hopefully this brings ice block back on the meta, because it has been something that is very good. That was very good, right? So there's definitely potential here.
And now you kind of have, like, if you got no other sustain options as a mage, right, you can just have this and just be popping it kind of as you go, looting around. If nobody's around, it doesn't really matter if you're burning your cooldowns in that situation, but having a little option for the sustain.
I also do want to mention an ability that's never been super popular in the metagame is Ice Wall, and hopefully we'll have something for that next patch.
Okay.
He says hopefully, more like we're already making something.
More like we play tested it yesterday.
It's in the works.
Yeah, we're looking at a replacement for Ice Wall. There are some people who like it, but generally it's just so situational.
Yeah.
You really, like,
I think it comes down to a little bit like that map can be very big and very open, right?
Yeah.
If you're not in a city fighting someone, it's hard to like really block off an area.
Exactly. And you know, I think if you really put a lot of effort into it, you could make Ice Wall as good as some other abilities.
Yeah, just more niche.
Or you could just get better with those abilities, right? Like,
yep.
So
definitely a cost there. We'll be seeing one reduction to a rune, the only rune in this balance patch, Chicken Revive rune. The reduced revive time reduction has been moved from 10 seconds down to 5 seconds.
Right, so we just wanted to bring it in line with the talent. So if you didn't have the rune and the talent, previously your chicken would come back in 5 seconds, which is like...
Yeah, tough.
Yeah, that's like you don't even get to shoot them before they're back into a
turns
player.
around the building. They just have to jump out a window and jump in another window, and then there's a dude in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Did you see a chicken come through here?
10 seconds is still pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you are running the talent and the rune, it's still going to be good.
And there's still speed. There's still health. There's still ways.
If you do go full chicken, you're going to be hard to catch. But we didn't want it to be completely a non-factor.
Right.
And with the rune and the talent, being chickened was kind of a non-factor. You just had 3 lives.
Definitely. I definitely feel that. That's going to do it for the balance changes, though, guys. We are going to